Clear prop.
Tower 73, Yankee number 2, following twin traffic, 3 mile final. Clear passenger. 1 Charlie Bravo, makes straight in runway 25, join 4 mile final.
This is Behind the Prop with United Flight Systems owner and licensed pilot Bobby Doss and his co-host, Major Airline Captain and designated pilot examiner Wally Mulhern. Now let's go Behind the Prop.
What's up, Wally?
Hey, Bobby, how are you?
I am fantastic as always. This is a unique circumstance where we have a famous general aviation person joining the show with us. Wally's all the way in Hawaii doing something in a hotel room before he has to catch his flight that he's bringing a bunch of people back from vacation. And I'm sitting at the flight school in the middle of a work day. I think Wally just had breakfast. I just ate lunch. And we have on the show with us today Mark Patey. He is the co-founder with his brother Mike on Best Tugs, and his 4 sons are owners along with his wife, and lots of other cool stuff for us to dive into today. Thanks for joining the show, Mark.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here from my mobile office, a truck.
Yeah, he's in a truck somewhere in the Northwest, I believe, probably.
Yeah, we're out in Utah today.
So he gets to fly a lot of cool iron and do a lot of cool things. Mark, tell us a little bit about your background, and then I'll start asking a bunch of questions, and we'll dive into more stuff about safety and aviation.
Yeah, happy to. Right now, I'm just this last year past 12,000 flight hours. I'm a commercial pilot, but I've never had a commercial pilot job. I just did that because I realized when we started buying and flying jets that the commercial rating helped with the insurance. And so we did that. I have just about every type rating you can get, including some jet type ratings and helicopter type ratings. And so I fly fixed wing and rotorcraft. All of my flying has been for my personal travel needs for both business and pleasure. So it's coming up on close to 30 years of flying now for me. And my wife is also a pilot of Susie, 15 years probably?
25.
25 years. Wow. She followed me in. And she flies a Cirrus now. She's had a 172 and a 177 Cardinal and Zenith 801 that we built up for her with a turbocharged Lycoming in it. And then RV6A, and then a RV10 we built for the family, and then you've now in a Cirrus that she's owned for quite a while, and that's it's all painted up for her and in our family colors. You would also say Best Tugs colors, and that airplane says Susie's Cirrus painted on the cowling. Because people would always say, "Oh, sure, that's your wife's plane." I'm like, "No, legitimately, that's my wife's airplane." In fact, yesterday, our Pilatus, Perry the platypus, was had other travel needs and was gone, and I needed to go to Sedona to check on some rental properties we have. And did I just take your Cirrus, or what did I do?
He actually asked, "Is it okay if I take your plane?"
I said, "Can I take your airplane?" She says, "Of course." So it is legitimately her airplane. So
there you go. So you've done a lot of interesting things and set some records. What are you most proud of in your aviation, the flying component? Maybe not the flying component. What are you most proud of in your aviation career?
I'm most proud of the company we built with my 4 sons, Best Tugs and now Best Aviation Products, which now builds power supplies and start packs, Best Scrubbers, which manufactures some premium aircraft hangar, scrubbers. And we're going into, I think we have like 47 new products in our engineering department that Best Aviation Products is continually developing, and will be rolling out more and more products to make aviation either more fun, sexier, or safer in some way. And so we're going to stick with, like what we did with Best Tugs. Our original goal was with Best Tugs was let's take what I learned from we used to own Prodigy Engineering, which was a premium hybrid electric vehicle engineering firm. And we sold that, and they said we couldn't do electric cars, trains, buses, or boats. That was part of our non-compete agreement. So we said, let's make smarter aircraft moving equipment, because I had done $46,000 in damage to my brand new Piper Meridian because I advanced the throttle a little too quick on another tug, and that broke the nose gear. And I thought, why are these not auto throttle? Why don't they have traction control, anti-lock brakes, torque sensing so don't break aircraft? And that was kind of the genesis of Best Tugs, is that if we can make a tug that's only 10 to 20% more money, but it has twice the value or twice the features and benefits in it, then we should be a successful company. And that worked. And so we're trying to do that with a bunch of other aviation products, is to say, if we can stay only 10 to 20% more and be twice the product, then we're the winning proposition. So that's what we're doing. And I'm very proud of what we've been able to do in with those companies.
And United Flight Systems is a Best Tugs customer, and we
Thank
move our
you.
fleet around with the Best Tug quite often, and it's extremely usable, flexible, and has a bunch of benefits. I don't think people realize the underlying engineering. You talked about a lot of those points, but when you talk about some of these remote control things that are out there, or these other type tugs that are gasoline powered and have, it's almost like a weed eater engine, right? It's got one speed and one speed only, and they look appealing because they're X dollars versus a
Yeah, they're
Best
less
Tug
money.
price tag. I
Yeah.
think your 20-30% uptick, that doesn't even matter. You're talking about, like you
No.
said, a nose gear. You're talking about the strut, just a repack a strut on a Cessna 172. If you went on a flight school, it's a day of downtime and about $580, right? That's
Oh
not
yeah.
that much. That's
Our
not
our
much
tug,
power in that.
no, our tugs generally are less money than the annual inspection of the airplane that you're flying. It's less money than the annual insurance you pay for the aircraft you're moving with it. So, and you don't have to buy it every year. You buy it once and you own an actual asset that'll always have a value. And so in aviation, the tug's actually the cheapest component. And so it's always interesting to me. We don't get every cell. There's other tug companies that still get cells. I think we get the lion's share of them. But we won't get all of them, and that's okay. Not everybody's our customer. But I do scratch my head sometimes and go, wait a second, the cost difference between that tug and our tug is less than one flight in your airplane. That's the delta, was one trip anywhere in your airplane, even a short distance. And but you have to live with the a lesser product for the next 5 to 10 years or however long you have that tug. So I do scratch my head and I go, I don't understand. But I also understand there is a point where if you just don't have the extra little bit of money, you don't have the extra bit of money, you still have to move an airplane. So we won't be the tug for everybody, but for people that are saying I want the best and I can afford the 10 to 20, 30% more money, then we're a good solution. Or so far we have been, and yeah. So thanks for bringing it up. I don't want to spend more time talking about that. I think we wanted to talk about aviation safety or other things.
Yep.
But yes, thank you for talking about our company. We're very proud of it, and we're working really hard to keep our customers happy.
So those that follow your channels on YouTube and other places that they've seen you speak or talk about things, you're probably best known for being a flying cowboy or one of the original flying cowboys. And I think that's a mantra of someone who flies that tailwheel aircraft to the backwoods, lands on the side of a hill. Our mutual acquaintance Joshua Brooks, thanks Joshua for making the connection for us, tells stories of your gear one gear can be up high, one gear can be down low. You can literally land on the side of a hill. I can't even imagine that. I'm only a 500 a shower pilot with a Vision Jet type rating, so I'm not the most advanced pilot in the world, but sounds like much more fun than point A to point B in a Cessna 172 or my Beach Travel Air. So talk about some of the flying cowboy stuff and then really the transition that you are making to being a safety advocate for general aviation.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about the flying cowboy stuff and then transition. I think, yeah, we can go into that too, but mostly it's what happens with age. The gray comes in, your kids get old, you have grandkids, and you start going, wow, I've come a long ways and did some stupid things. And the funny thing about stupid things is stupid's in but eye of the beholder. So I want to talk about that a little bit. But The Flying Cowboy started really, which was sad, and we walked away from it about 5, 6 years ago. But that stuff lives online forever. But it really was just friends that loved the backcountry that would go flying, and we called ourselves the Flying Cowboys because we used our bush planes to help our friends gather up their cattle at the end of a season and go find the missing cows. And I grew up on a dirt road in Orem, Utah, when there was still lots of the roads were dirt. We had an orchard in the backyard. So Flying Cowboys was literally more to do with where we grew up and how we grew up, and nothing to do with being flying outlaws. So when we played aggressively with our airplanes, and they're like, yeah, flying cowboys, they're a bunch of flying outlaws and breaking every law and breaking every reg and doing risky, dangerous stuff, and they're bragging about it. We're like, no, we're just literally cowboys. We're literally rednecks from dirt streets with no money. That's just literally the flying cowboys. We're herding cattle. That's how it started. But unfortunately, because we played aggressively with our planes, the flying outlaw was the general feeling we started to see people have towards us. And, 10 years ago, that bothered me a lot. I'm like, wait a second. We're actually putting a lot of time in our airplanes. My first bush plane was my first bush plane was a 182 with big tires, and then everything I had, I'd fly into grass strips, Cessna 210 and 172. But when I got into tail draggers, my first one was a Rand's S7, and I started doing videos of some fun landings and places in that. After I was probably maybe 5 or 6 thousand hours total time as a pilot, and about 800 hours in my Rand's S7. And I was flying that thing almost every day. I used to have a hashtag a flight a day. And that was literally uh, every day I'd leave work and go to the airport and go practice for an hour. And in a little cub in a small airport with nobody in the pattern, you can get a lot of landings in an hour. And I would practice every single hour. And so when we started doing some short takeoff and landings in really, really tight places, people would say, those dumb mother effers are going to get themselves killed and other people killed. And I was offended, but now, and it made me angry, but I would never, you don't defend yourself online.
No.
You just go quiet, right? You just don't say anything. It just gets worse. But now as I'm, 10, 12 years later, I'm looking back and going, we did do a disservice to the aviation community because we didn't show all the practice that went in for days or weeks before we went and did something scary, right? Or dangerous. And that does get people thinking they can do it, so I can do it. It's like, well, maybe not true. Some of the stuff I did in my Rands, I would not do today, not because I couldn't, but because I'd have to have that airplane again. I'd have to fly it every day for a while, and I have to get to that skill set again to go do it safely. And so people would look at it and think the only conclusion they have is, hey, he just got a Rands a couple years ago, probably only has 50 hours on it. They don't think about how much we trained in it. And now look what he's going to do in it. He's going to get himself killed. And it's like, yeah, if that's your perspective, you're right. I would have got myself killed. Backcountry flying is as dangerous as flying an instrument approach. If you're not proficient, you're dead. Like flying an instrument approach without the skill set is the dumbest thing a human could do, but it is legal, but it will kill you and kills people all the time. And backcountry flying, because it doesn't have such a defined criteria that says, here's the skill set you need to fly down to minimums on a rainy night in foggy weather, like that will kill you. But we do know how to do it safely, and you train to get there. In backcountry aviation, the Flying Cowboys did not do a good job saying, hey, look, here's all the work that goes into coming into a place like this or landing this short or taking off this short. We just went and did it. And that is dangerous and that is reckless. Like to even let people think, oh, that airplane can just go do that. And then I got into my Carbon Cub and put over 1,000 hours in that Carbon Cub before I started competing in it and doing dangerous things, like flying an instrument approach in a Carbon Cub, which again, not dangerous. If you have instrument rating and equipped and qualified, not dangerous. But again, same thing. But I also recognize, and I know I've gone long-winded here, that as I've gotten older and got grandkids, I look back and go, I'm not the same pilot at 12,000 hours I was at 6, 7, 8,000 hours. I'm a lot more cautious. I lost a few more friends. Things that I didn't think were risky before, I do think is risky now. For example, I don't fly single engine piston at night. And some would say that's perfectly safe and sane. And I'm like, and me, former flying cowboy, doesn't think it's safe to fly single engine piston at night. Now, my wife's Cirrus a little bit different because it has a parachute, but I don't fly it at night in weather, and I don't like to fly it in IMC at night, even though it has a parachute. I'm like, I've lost enough engines from my racing days when I used to race our Lancer Legacies, and you push them to win, and the engines blow up, and I've taken a few planes to the ground without an engine, and I've never wrecked one, fortunately. My brother Mike had the incident with Draco, which was really tragic, and he owns up to the mistakes he made there. But after you take a few engines to the ground, or airplanes to the ground with no engine, and after you see a few friends go west in aviation, and as your hair turns gray instead of brown, it's easier to look back and say, yeah, the Flying Cowboys, we did dangerous things safely by preparing, but it was dangerous to put some of that stuff out there without a proper explanation of the work that went into doing dangerous things safely. Like flying an instrument approach, it's a very dangerous thing you can do safely if you're prepared for it.
Yeah, I can imagine when I was a new pilot some 10 years ago, had I saw those videos, and I don't remember seeing them early on in my flying career, but I would have been like, "Oh my god, that's crazy." But now that I've owned a flight school for 8 of those 10 years, I think it maybe oversimplifies it, but your personal minimums are very different than mine. You're a world champion at STOL competitions, short field takeoff and landing competitions, where mine might be a 3,000-foot runway, yours might be a 3-foot runway. Very different, but the skill set and the personal minimums and the practice and the amount of hours, you've got them. I don't. I would be crazy. You wouldn't be crazy. Wally, you were gonna say something?
This is exactly the point, and Wally, I want to hear what you have to say, but this is what everyone needs to realize in aviation to allow a little more grace and love, especially online, because there's not a lot of love online. It's a good place to throw rocks. But we all look at other pilots through our lens. They go, that's crazy. And it's like, that's crazy for you. Or I might go, what Michael Goulian does in his aerobatic routine is crazy. But I never would say that because it's not crazy for him. He has the skill set. It's crazy for me. Right. And an instrument approach to 200 feet for me at one point was something I would never do. I started flying instrument. I'd be like, I'll go to 3,000 feet overcast, but that's it. And then as the skill set developed, now I'll go to 2,000, now 1,000. Now I'll go to 1,000 in this airplane, but this other airplane only 2,000. And this airplane, I'll go to 200 foot and not even think about flying a missed approach. But this other airplane, it's 800 foot. The minimums change with every pilot and every aircraft they're flying. And so what I'm willing to do in a helicopter is totally different as far as my skill set to say fixed wing. And if we can look at aviation through the lens of the aviator, not our own lens, we might have a little more grace and might be a little kinder towards each other. I'm going to let my wife drive. I'm going to keep talking. Wally, please, I'd love to hear what you're saying.
That's a great perspective that you brought up about the amount of time that you practice. I used to be into cycling, bicycling, and several hundred miles a week, many hours on the bike. And if a lot of times I'm riding that bike with no hands, And
Sure.
I knew that bike. I could make that bike do whatever I wanted. And I find myself driving down the road with family, wife and kids or whatever, and they'll see someone doing that and they'll go, "What an idiot that guy is or that girl." And I go, "Well, maybe not. Maybe
Maybe not.
maybe
It's where's their
yeah.
skill set?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So that's a really, I'm gonna somehow incorporate what you're saying, is gonna become part of my check ride routine. I don't know how it's gonna get in there, but it's gonna get in there somehow.
Well, the other part about being online and having a show like this, of course, we get feedback, we have those reviews, we hear the audience, but when it's local and a plane might go off the runway, it is shocking how much negativity comes out in the
Oh,
first 30 seconds, the first
oh my
20
gosh.
minutes, and
I
they
wanna
blame it
cry
they
for
blame it on
anyone
the
that has an
airport.
incident.
Yeah, it and they blame it on the maintenance. They don't even know what the maintenance is on that aircraft. They don't even know the skills of the pilot. They don't know what happened. It could have been a turtle. For all we know, it could have been a turtle that got on the runway.
Could have been a seized bearing that, just
Anything.
locked up. A brake pad broke free. I could anything, but yeah,
I always
I wish
joke because
people could just breathe and wait and see as opposed to, um, seek to be the smartest person the quickest, which usually results in looking pretty dumb
well, the
ultimately,
other thing
but
that really hurts me, and we're recording the show, less than 24 hours after a major aviation incident occurred
yeah.
in the United States, and, man, I would never say a word. I see the video, have no idea what happened, haven't even really listened to anything else, but I was so frustrated last night by how many people are students or past students at this flight school that just shared the post. Like, you're doing no good for the family, you're doing no good for aviation. You just want clicks, you just want likes on your posts. Like, the message, the news is out there. Why do you feel the need to share that story? That is a rock, whether it's a condemnation of the pilots or the plane or whatever, just sharing a post like that is doing us no good in general aviation or aviation as general.
Well,
I
the first report I read on that incident you're talking about, Bobby, stated that the airplane had 220,000 gallons of fuel on board, which is about 1.8 million pounds. And
yeah.
I thought, well, I mean, I know it's minor, but yeah, 220,000 pounds, not gallons. So it just makes you wonder what else is in this story that I'm reading that is just inaccurate, just wrong.
Well, we
Well, we
probably all
certainly
saw the
saw that
video.
with the Flying Cowboys when we used to do that. We couldn't post a video without people assuming the worst in everything we did. And we got to know our Salt Lake City Bizdo on a first name basis. I mean,
Wow.
and that said, I've never been violated for anything ever. But I've had so many phone calls. In fact, I won't use his name, but one of the guys from our FISDO would call and say, "Hey, Mark, it's me." And I'm like, "Oh no, who now?" He says, STP, which means same 10 people turning us in. They can't tell you who turned you in.
Right.
And he says, and this is what they're accusing you of this time. We're like, well, this is the airspace we're in. Here's a GPS track to show it. Okay. Yep. You can do that in that airspace. You're good. Okay. That's all we needed to know. The next time it's like, this is what you're turned in this time. We never got violated ever. But criminy, the time people wasted of ours and anybody else. And you get to a point you're like, I don't ever want to post anything online, even if it can help somebody, because I don't want to call from somebody or some hater saying, you did this illegal, you did that wrong. I'm like, why don't you assume we did it legally first instead of assuming something's illegal and then taking the assumptions to the FAA? And what's happened with this crash that just happened that you're talking about, it's the same thing. Everybody assumes the worst in everybody and everything, and the aircraft manufacturer, the engine, the fuel, the mechanic, the pilots, they assume the worst in everybody. And not everybody does that. But there's enough that do that it robs us of real opportunities to grow, real opportunities to learn. And it does get to a point where good pilots and student pilots actually start tuning it out and don't listen to anything because 90% of it's BS anyway. And the 10% that's actually true gets missed. We miss those beautiful learning opportunities because there's so much nonsense out there. We just have to turn it all off. And that's a disservice.
We did a show, I don't know how long ago it's been, but we did a show on you're also, like you said, you don't wanna post something. Well, there's a good story out there. There is a near miss that happened somewhere this week, this month, this year, that
Oh,
the
wow.
guy or girl wants to tell their story, but they're afraid if I tell the story, the FAA is gonna call me, and we could all learn from that. Mark could learn from that. 12,000 hours. Wally, 25,000 hours. 2,000 check rides given. Like, we need to hear those messages so we don't make the same mistake, but if everybody's afraid to tell their story because they're gonna get slaughtered online by the media or the mass group of people that think they're better pilots, it's just gonna continue to set us
The
further back.
keyboard pilots is what we always called them
Yes.
back when we were playing Fly Cowboys. We're like, anyone who flies their keyboard more than an actual airplane are the biggest haters.
Well, and I know you don't mean
Yeah.
it, but they might have only flown a Microsoft simulator too. Like, they might have 1,000 hours in Microsoft Sim, not any, and think they know better than the rest of us. Um,
Well, let me tell you something I've done that maybe I need to actually start posting the videos. A few years ago, I started a podcast. I recorded a few episodes, and then I just got busy and didn't do it. But it was called the Pilot Confessional. And like a confessional, I had a mesh screen pilots would sit behind where they would remain anonymous and could tell the story about the stupid thing they did that almost got them killed. I think other people need to hear the story because when somebody dies, we all have to assume what was going through their head. And what I wanted to do was give a safe place where people who should have died that didn't, we can actually interview them and say, well, what made you take the one step further into the ice? What were you thinking that when you got to, because it's usually three things that get us killed. It's not one, it's a thing stack, right? I'm like,
mhm.
what got you to the second thing? What got you to the third thing? And now here you are, you should have been dead telling your story. But uh, so that was it, was the pilot confessional. I even talked with the FISDO, a couple FISDOs, and said, if I do these pilot confessionals and I have them anonymous and they tell a story about something that they could get violated for, are you gonna hang them out to dry? Because what I want to do is hear from the people that did it wrong and live. Like, let's learn from those people. Like you said, there's a story, a near miss that needs to be told, but they're afraid to tell it. Aviation shouldn't be that way. Like, if we had a whoops, I blew it, I screwed up, I almost died, this is on me. Those stories should be told, not hidden. And the only time we hear those stories is with a trusted friend who lives in the hangar next to us that says, please don't tell anyone ever. And they tell you the story and you go, oh my gosh, I've mentally been there. I could be you and dead. And but we don't share it past that. So, Gal, maybe if anything comes from this conversation today is I take some of those stories and post them. One of the guys that shared a story with me um, shared a story about making bad decisions in bad weather in his Cub in Alaska. Um, it wasn't too much time went by that he died in his Cub, making a bad decision. And I thought, God, if these stories, these discussions need to be had without fear of the aviation community ostracizing them for sharing a learning experience. They should be celebrating them for being bold enough to take the hate because it helps enough people that won't hate but will love hearing the experience.
I love that idea. Obviously, as a podcaster, I super love that idea. I think that's something we need. I do anything I can to support you, Mark, on that journey, and hopefully, our global audience will send me some emails about some of those stories and get in line to produce some of those shows because it really is the message. We've had Paul Craig on here a number of times, the author of The Killing Zone, and he talks about it all the time. He has no idea how many people's lives his books have saved. He only knows that he's gonna get to write a 4th edition because people aren't gonna learn. And how sad is that, that we can't hear the opposite of the killing zone and tell stories of the living zone. I got lucky, but I lived through the killing zone, and I should be telling that story for sure. How do you think we build a collaborative community around aviation safety?
I think the first thing that's going to have to change if we want to really build safety in aviation is the mudslinging. Um, the the trash talking, the belittling of the presumed expert pilots that have never made a mistake in their hot life, never wished they were on the ground. You know, the guys that just are perfect, and apparently they all are. You see them online. Um, but that mudslinging has got to stop. We want to have honest conversations. We need to start being kinder with each other. We need to start going, because like for me, when someone would say, "Oh," make a comment, assuming the worst about something we did in our Cubs or helicopter, whatever, they would start trashing, and I'd go, "That's 100% not true." And I could reply and teach people some things about flying on the backside of the power curve in a Cub in certain situations that might help them learn something. But I won't. I will not teach this valuable lesson because I don't want the hate of the guy that has never done it, doesn't understand it, or why it has purpose in certain situations. And so you don't. And I guess it's two things. One, the mudslinging has to slow down. And two, people that might have something that others could learn from have got to be strong enough to share it, even though they know someone's going to say, well, I disagree with that. And forever, and you'll never convince me. You have to go, okay, I'll never convince you. That's okay. Um, might help
I don't
somebody.
remember I don't remember all the details, but I clearly remember when your brother's accident occurred and how forthcoming he was about his mistakes and how open he was, and I think I was so new to aviation back in those days, I don't think I understood how important that was, but he was a living example of what we're talking about, was he not?
Well, yeah, Mike's a strong personality, and he still gets his feelings hurt online. But it takes a strong personality to go, that was my mistake. I blew it. I made a mistake, and it could have killed me and my wife and a friend. And um, but I'll tell you, the stronger you are at owning up to your own mistakes, the faster you'll learn. That it's I've said it in and Mike and I have built a few companies, been fortunate enough to sell a few of them, and I've always said the guy with the biggest ego in the boardroom is the lowest intelligence. And it's true every time. The guy screaming the yellowest has the biggest ego, has to flex the largest and tell the grandest story, is usually the dumbest guy in the room because ego precedes, it gets in the way of learning. If you have a big ego, you can't learn, right? So the guy that
Agreed.
says, my mistake, I need to make a change, usually has a high level of intelligence because their ego's not in the way of evolving. And I'm still evolving. Like I look at it, I know that when we were really aggressive on the flying Cowboys, whatever, 10, 12 years ago, anything anybody said, I'm like, screw you. I know how to fly my airplane. And now I'm like, yeah, I did know how to fly my airplane. And there's some valid points there. And I need to own up to the fact that I'm evolving and learning to be a smarter, safer pilot. And just because I knew how to fly an airplane didn't make everything we did smart.
So I appreciate the time today. Well, I got 2 more questions, and then I'll let you get back to your daily life, and hopefully we'll do a part 2 somewhere out in the future. But for those pilots that are listening to this show who want to have adventure with caution, and they want to assess the risks and the risks to them and the environment they're in, what would be the advice you would give them to teach new aviators how to assess that risk and balance the reward of exciting flying, but do it cautiously and safely?
Oh my gosh. The first thing that comes to mind is to thine own self be true, but that's not exactly what I'm trying to say. I guess it would be more to thine own self be honest. If you can take an honest look at you as a pilot and where you are specifically, um, that's going to go the farthest in keeping you safe. Because people get this idea that now that I have an instrument rating, I can go shoot an approach. No, you have an instrument rating, you pass the test, you are now legal to learn how not to die. Like
Amen.
that's all you have. But you have to be honest with yourself with that. It's like I got checked out in a tail wheel. I got my tail wheel endorsement. It's like, great. You are now legally capable to go try not to die in your tail wheel airplane. Like you hit the minimum requirement. Wally knows this so true. You've done so many check rides, minimums. They don't test you to the maximum proficiency. It is here's the minimum to let you safely go out and risk your life. And we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be honest with our own personal minimums. We can't watch, say, my brother Mike and I, who happen to be identical twins, flying identical airplanes and spent thousands of hours together, and we have a twin connection. Don't go fly formation after you finish your formation clinic the way my brother Mike and I fly formation. That's stupid, right?
Yep.
But for Mike and I, it's different. But you have to be honest. But again, like I'm pretty good I've been flying helicopters for a long time. I've owned 7 helicopters now. I currently own 2. And I know I'm not the best helicopter pilot. I just happen to have owned a lot of helicopters and own a couple now. But I'm safe. I'm confident. Would I fly IMC in my helicopter? No. Like, heck no. Not even for a second, even though one of my choppers is legal and capable to fly an approach. I won't do it. Like, I won't even go in the clouds. But take that to every part of aviation and say, where am I? Am I a competent IFR pilot? Yep. My wife, Cirrus, my Pilatus, a bunch of other airplanes I've owned, I'll take them right to minimums without a thought. When I first started flying IFR, I wasn't. Will I take my helicopter IMC? I will not. And I, that's it. I know that was a long answer, but
it's a good one and it's the right one.
Yourself. Be honest with where you are today and where you want to go, and be kind to yourself with how long it takes to get there, and accept that you're going to make some mistakes and have some watch landings and get it below the glide slope, and just learn how to do these dangerous things safely, little by little. And if you can be honest with yourself and others and cut yourself some grace, you'll learn.
Okay. My last question is, flying Cowboys might be the past, but what initiatives or projects are you most excited about next? Whether they're aircraft designs things, best tug things, business things, advocacy things. What are you most excited about in the future for you, your family, and aviation?
That's a great question. I guess for me, I shared it on some other aviation channels, but had a near-death experience. Turns out it wasn't an airplane that almost killed me. It was having my gallbladder out. They nicked my colon. I got E. coli sepsis. I was asymptomatic for 10 days. So by the time I felt sick, I already had full kidney failure, full liver failure, and died on the way to the hospital of heart failure. That was a big wake-up call. And so for me, my whole life shifted. I don't want anything more. I am enough as I am, as imperfect of a human as I am. I don't need to do more. I don't want any more records, trophies. I don't need to build anything spectacular. I just want peace. I want to live a long time. I want to see my grandkids grow up. And I think that's a big part of my shift in aviation, from flying cowboy to safety advocate, I want people to spend a long time on this earth loving the human they are and the humans around them. And that means loving everybody in all their imperfectness.
Yep.
And if I can see that happen somehow in aviation, where we can all just kind of love and hold space and honor each other as we make mistakes and learn and grow and evolve and celebrate that evolution, y'all, I want to be a part of that in any way possible.
That's awesome. I have on my desk at home a card that's propped up right in front of me that says, I have enough. I can't believe you use those same words. For me, I think I chased so much. I chased money, I chased the title, I chased the job, and almost lost my wife to breast cancer. And I probably got that card shortly thereafter, right? Because the desire to just want and want eats everybody up. I'm not quite there yet. I think you're probably well far ahead of me in your journey to believing the statement that you have enough. But it is something I try and ground myself with very often, because that want to go get more doesn't mean anything if my wife's not with me, if my kids aren't around, if I don't get to meet my grandkids one day. And I think that's a really powerful statement for us to wrap up a really good show about general aviation safety. We probably all have enough. Yeah. Do you all want a new plane? If you have a 172, you want a 182. If you got a 182, you want a 210. If you got a 210, you want a 420. It's just going to continue to go forever, right? So I've never met a pilot who owned a plane who didn't want the next one up. Like, it doesn't matter. We all going to have wants, but we probably do all have enough. Mark, I can't thank you enough for joining the show. Thanks for your wife being your chauffeur as you talk to us throughout this show. Hopefully we can do a part 2 one day. Everyone listening, go check out his channels all over YouTube. It won't take much if you search him by name. I'll put in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and stay behind the prop.
Thanks for checking out the Behind the Prop podcast. Be sure to click subscribe and check us out online at BehindTheProp.com. Behind the Prop is recorded in Houston, Texas. Creator and host is Bobby Doss. Co-host is Wally Mulhern. The show is for entertainment purposes only and is not meant to replace actual flight instruction. Thanks for listening, and remember, fly safe.